Hey, one more thing before you go. What do you do when you lose your mother and you're about to become a mother yourself? Who do you ask about raising a child? Who do you turn to? When you're separated from your mother by physical distance, estrangement, or death, how can we talk to them or find support? In this episode, we're going to learn how you, as a mother, can recognize that it's okay and there are people there to help you. And if your spouse has lost their mother, how you can help them move forward from feelings of insecurity, isolation, and overwhelm to be in a place of resilience. I'm your host, Michael Hirsch, and this is The Thing About Moms Without Moms. My guest in this episode is a mom without a mom of two boys. She's a clinical psychologist and a mom coach passionate about helping moms separated from their mother by physical distance, estrangement, or death move from feelings of insecurity, isolation, and overwhelm to a place of resilience. Dr. Melissa Riley, through her personal and professional experience, has come to recognize that moms without a mom experience grief as part of their motherhood, even if they don't realize it. The relationship moms had or didn't have with their mothers impacts how they see themselves, but doesn't define them. In this episode, we're going to have a conversation and learn about the notion that it isn't knowledge and skills that create resilience, but rather is born through overcoming hardship, having a community, and living by one's values. I'm your host, Michael Hurst, and welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. As we were just saying a little bit ago, it's a wonderful thing you do. And I think that helping people move forward in a very, very positive way and helping them through their hardships, their obstacles in life is a great thing. So thank you for being here for that.
It's my pleasure.
Well, I kind of like to start from the beginning. Kind of see how your journey evolved into where you're at right now, because I know you've had some experiences that help contribute to why you do this and how you do this because of those experiences. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in upstate New York in the Catskill Mountains. So, if anybody has been to New York, the Catskills is a beautiful mountainous area about 100 miles north of New York City.
And is that what was your family like? I got stumped there for a second. I was thinking about the Catskill Mountains.
Yeah.
uh,
Well, I was born into a family, both my parents, and I had an older sister and a younger sister. But unfortunately, my older sister was diagnosed with leukemia. And after several years of battling that illness, she died at the age of 7 when I was only 4 years old.
yeah, I'm sorry
And
for that.
so, yeah, so unfortunately, my early life was impacted dramatically by her loss. And then, of course, being raised by parents who were grieving the loss of their oldest child. So that shaped a lot of my early life. But fortunately, my parents had supports and did the best that they could. And, my early life was as good as it could be. And
D-
then, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, but I say, your parents? I mean, obviously, it's devastating when you lose a child. And it's as a parent myself. To me, it would be difficult to move forward after losing a child. My parents lost a brother that was born after me, right after birth, and I know that my parents really took that hard. It took a very, very long time for them to get over that loss. I have you. Did your parents were they able to kind of move forward?
They did the best that they could. How we coped with it was by never talking about it. So my parents, um, it was really important for them to give me and my younger sister quote unquote normal life, right? And so
Mm.
they weren't going to let the hardships that we faced because of my sister's illness stop us. And unfortunately, by never talking about it, for little kids, it kind of resulted in this idea that death was so terrible that you couldn't even talk about it. And so I realized
Right.
later as a young adult just what an impact that had um, on both me and my little sister, that death became something that was just this terrifying thing to experience.
Yeah, I
And
think that, in my experience, both personally and professionally, death is a taboo subject. It seems
mhm,
to be in the United States, at least. I know some in other countries and some other cultures, they embrace it. But here in the United
right,
States, it's kind of a taboo subject. It's very difficult to talk about. It's a, even if it is especially if it's a close family member, you're supposed to kind of push down those feelings and just move past it, move
right.
forward. I think that things are starting to change from that direction, especially after COVID. Do you think?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my mom, God bless her, my sister had died, and then 10 days later my little sister turned 3, and my mother had a birthday party at our house for my little sister. I mean, just 10 days after burying her oldest child. And then I was only 4, and a few months later I started kindergarten because my mom was determined to not let anything hold me back, right? Even though I'd gone through several years of very traumatic experience, because leukemia is, back in the 70s was almost always terminal. It's still a very difficult disease nowadays, but thankfully they have more advanced treatment than they did back then. So me and my younger sister um, were taken care of often by neighbors and other friends, so that my parents could be with my sister in New York City while she was getting her treatments. So, but right after she died, my mom, we had talked briefly about it. She felt so guilty about the impact that my older sister's illness and death had on me and my younger sister, that she tried to compensate by making sure nothing, you know, more uh, would come of it. And like I said, they did the best they could, but it was difficult.
It was a great mom to help you guys through that from
Mhm.
with that perspective.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
did you go to university?
I did. I went to Elmira College for my first 4 years, and then got both my master's and my doctorate from University of Hartford.
Was it in psychology, or
Yes.
had you always
Yep.
wanted to
Yep.
be
My
a psychologist?
major. Um, funnily, when I was really little, I wanted to be a scientist. And then somebody told me, "Oh, you'll have to go to school for like 7 years." And I thought, "Oh my goodness, that's too long." Um, well, I wound up going to school for 10 years. So,
Uh, yeah, they didn't tell you the other end. Being a doctor,
right.
you got to go a little bit longer.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, I knew early on that I wanted to be a psychologist. I mean, not surprisingly, given the early childhood loss, I became really empathic. I was really good at kind of understanding how others around me were doing. And some of that was really kind of a survival mechanism,
Mhm.
especially since there were times that I would wake up and not know where I was because we had to be dropped off somewhere. Um, so I became really good at kind of recognizing the emotional tenor of the people around me.
That's good. I mean, obviously, I think that you know, I've had a lot of conversations on one more thing before you go, especially dealing with grief and tragedy and people overcoming
Mhm.
tragedy and turning that into triumph. And the same thing with in my personal and professional life. I found that sometimes our childhoods define us in a good way. A
Mhm.
lot of times they define us in a bad way. And you took it to a positive level and created something that you can turn around into helping other people. Which is really kudos for that. You came through it with a positive approach instead of a negative approach. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I truly recognize I would not be the person I am today if it wasn't for those difficulties early on.
Oh, that's it's interesting. That's why I became a cop. I have a dysfunctional family, and at the same time, and I thought I could change the world. Kind of a deal. And it we all come out of it in a way that we're hoping it changes the world. And
Yeah,
I think your impact that you're doing is really well. So,
absolutely.
um, I know you lost your mother. At what point did you lose your mother?
Well, my I lost my mom when I was 25, and then unfortunately, 7 months later, my little sister also died. So I went from a family of, four women and one man, my dad, to a family of just me and my dad. So I lost all of the female members of my immediate family.
Wow, that's got to create a huge impact on your life.
Yes, it was absolutely a huge impact. Now, thankfully, I have an amazing aunt, who's only 10 years older than I am. So she's always been more of a sister to me. So thankfully, I continue to have her in my life. But yeah, it was, yeah, those, that year when I lost both my mother and my sister, was extremely difficult to say the least.
Well, coming from not just a human being perspective, but you are a psychologist. So, coming from a psychologist, was it difficult to try to separate your personal and your professional life and kind of understand what you were going through or what you were about to go through?
Um, yeah, I was, so there was a lot of family dynamics, that were occurring during my graduate school years. So, I really kind of learned about the impact family had on me, and I was able to, recognize healthy boundaries and things like that. And, then when I experienced the losses, I, um, understood the grief process, and that didn't make it any easier.
Right.
But for a little while, I had tried to, um, minimize the number of patients I saw that were also grieving. But the reality is that didn't work, because somebody would say they were coming in because of anxiety, but then it would turn out they were anxious because somebody had just died. So
Did
so I became very quickly, able to separate my own experiences from the experiences of the clients I worked with. But I also realized pretty quickly just how much my own personal experience allowed me to understand a number of, circumstances that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you have a specialty in your psychology? Did like were you mental health? What? Um,
Well, yeah, I am a clinical psychologist. So early in my career, I was working at a hospital, but in their outpatient mental health, unit, and I saw individuals of all ages and many different diagnoses. And then, after 7 years there, I, opened my own practice with another psychologist, and have really specialized more in working with adults and, with, depression, anxiety, a lot of grief. Um, Work a lot with individuals with traumatic histories. And then more recently, I'm focusing, more specifically on working with moms, particularly moms without a mom.
that's an amazing career, actually. And coming from I mean, I know it's got to be hard. It's hard as an individual to have to experience what you experience, especially on multiple levels, because it wasn't just one. You know, you
Right.
had several, and those several compounded upon each other, which obviously creates a void in your life, not just once, but three times. And at the same time, I'm sure you probably had to kind of keep an eye on your father too, because he lost the same number of people.
Absolutely, absolutely. When my younger sister died, just after my mother died, it wasn't even him that had called me. It was the doctor at the hospital, because he just couldn't, and I understood that.
Right.
And so as soon as I got the call, I was living in Pennsylvania. He was in New York. I drove right to the house, and I remember he said to me, I can't put everybody through this. We're not going to have any services. We're not going to do anything. I just can't put everybody through this again. And I remember at that point, Michael, I said, Dad, you aren't putting anybody through anything. Jennifer died. We didn't do that. So, I recognized he couldn't do any of the arrangements. He couldn't make any of the calls. So at that point, at the age of 26, I was 100% responsible for arranging and contacting everybody. Um, and I did. Um, and, my dad did the best that he could.
Right.
So, and
I
then, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I say that that in itself is, that in itself creates an environment that you're a caretaker now, is in some respect. So not only do you have the regular responsibilities, and you're trying to get through this yourself, you are now having to shut those feelings down in order to be a caretaker, which creates, you know, um, a specific situation for you, to have to get through everything as well. I think all of that personal experience has got to come forward when you help the people that you help. I'm sure because
Hmm.
you could say I've been there. I empathize with you.
Absolutely. And thankfully, it wasn't too much, you know, longer after my sister passed that my dad began, another relationship. And he remarried, actually, to a friend of my mother's. And they were married for 15 years. And then, unfortunately, she passed. So I lost my stepmother as well. Um,
Wow.
and then, yeah. But my dad carried on, and he's actually married now a third time to
Third,
another one of my mother's friends.
third time's a charm.
Exactly, exactly. And so, kind of, we all kind of joke, Dad, you've run through all the friends now. So
Yeah,
my
that
dad's,
would.
yeah,
That's
it's like,
kind of
nope,
funny.
this is it.
I had to laugh. I'm sorry. That's
Yeah, no, it is funny.
it's like yeah. Do you have any? Did your mother have any other friends I don't know about that I can meet?
Exactly.
Oh, that's
So
interesting. Um, I know that you came to a full realization when you had your own child. Just the impact that your mother was gone happened to kind of really present itself in a way that um, kind of hit you right in your face.
yes, absolutely. You know, being a psychologist, my focus was academics and my career. And so I was a later in life mom. And so I was in my mid 30s before I began trying to have my family. And unfortunately, I had three miscarriages
Wow.
prior to my fourth pregnancy. And when I was carrying my fourth pregnancy, I went into preterm labor at 26 weeks and nearly lost him as well. And thankfully, I was able to carry him to 37 weeks, despite the fact the doctors only gave me a 10% chance of carrying him to full term. So we
Congratulations.
beat the odds. Yes, thank you. So that was a very medically fragile, complicated pregnancy. Um, and I really became aware during all of, the pregnancies, the losses, um, and then giving birth, just how much I really wanted my mom. I missed her terribly. The last 8 months of her life were difficult between her and I. Um, we were estranged. And thankfully, the 2 weeks prior to her death, we had just begun talking. We had two conversations that had gone well. And so when she passed, I really held on to this idea that if she had lived, we would have worked things out. So when, I had those miscarriages and then the difficulty with the pregnancy, you know, I, I missed her, but I also realized how much I was just missing having a mom in general. I didn't have anybody to talk to about those experiences. And I didn't have the opportunity to ask my mom what it was like for her, having children. And she had had a miscarriage as well. So it would have been nice to be able to talk to her about that experience, because that's something, we don't talk much about.
Yeah, that I think that when we lose a parent, especially at a young age, because when you lost, how old were you when you lost her? 26,
25. I was
25.
25.
So even at 25 years old, you are still a young woman, and
Hmm.
mothers are typically. I say this, you know, proudly. Mothers and fathers are typically with us for a very long time past that 26-year mark. So yeah, when we lose somebody like that, it creates a void that sometimes is irreplaceable, because you never really have your mom. You never really have your dad. And you do have step parents, and they can take that, fill that just a little bit, and they can fill. I mean, I had a stepfather for 25 years, and he proved to me that you don't have to be blood to be family.
Hmm.
But when when my wife and I had our daughters, I was missing my father very much, because I thought, hey, you could have seen, these wonderful children that we have here, and then when we had difficulties too and things like that, it would have been great to talk. So I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
How did you overcome that? At what point did you recognize, and what steps did you take proactively to kind of move forward from that void?
Well, honestly, Michael, it took me a couple years to realize that what I was experiencing was in large part due to the fact that I was a mom without a mom. I just was struggling so much and just felt terrible about myself. I felt like there was something wrong with me. I
Right.
mean, here I was, this professional woman, just days shy of 38, had business, my own business. And yet I couldn't seem to get my act together to take care of this little baby. And there were so many things I didn't know. So many things I didn't know,
Right.
because I didn't have, women around me. My friends that were moms, their kids were teenagers and young adults. So they were just at a different stage of life than I was. So, I suffered in silence. I recognized I had postpartum depression, but I didn't recognize that the underlying, trigger for that was grief. And so simply focusing on the depressive symptoms wasn't addressing the longing that I was having, the lack of community. I mean, for most people, moms tend to be a go-to person. And so if you are a mom that doesn't have a mom, either because she's died or because you don't have a relationship with her, if there's an estrangement, or even if you're living far away from each other, not having your mom there available to help, um, in case of emergency or just if you're stressed out, it weighs heavy on you. And then we all know being a mom is hard, but the reality is being a mom without a mom is even harder. And for those listeners out there that are moms without a mom, I want you to recognize that what you are doing is difficult. It is hard. And there isn't something wrong with you because you're struggling. It just is.
It's a profound statement, actually. I think, and I mean that goes for it, not to say anything aside, but that goes for guys too, for men as
Yes.
well. When you lose your mother, I mean, who do we call
Mhm.
first, right? We call mom. You know, you pick
Exactly.
up the phone, you call your mom. You know, what about this and this and this?
Absolutely.
Got to tell mom. So yeah, mothers in our lives in a whole are a very
Hmm.
important aspect of our lives as we move forward and grow in life. We all look to mom. So yeah, I'm sure that that had to be a difficult journey, especially after everything that you had gone through. That you didn't have your mother there available. So once you recognized and were able to kind of validate that what you're feeling and where it was coming from, um, what steps did you take to kind of move forward?
Well, first, once I began recognizing the grief process, um, I was able to then start expressing and talking about my experiences, and that's a really important piece is to be able to express your emotions and your stories, right? So I could talk about my mom, I could talk about what I was missing about not having mom, um, and then being able to fill in some of the gaps. All right, and what I mean by that is who are the people that I need to put into my life that my mother can't be part of. So I talk a lot about building a mom community. And I think all moms, all women actually, and not just women, everybody, but I'm going to talk specifically about moms here, um, should have four people in their life. And so the first person that they should have is the wise woman. And so this is the person who knows things. So you ask them questions and they are just a fountain of knowledge. And if they don't know, they know how to get the answer. And you can ask them questions about things that you just don't know. The second person is the emotional supporter. And this is the person that you can just share how you're feeling. They don't give advice and they don't try and cheer you up. They just listen to where you are at that moment. And then the third person is the go getter. And this is the person that can get things done. And so we all know somebody in our life who is always moving, always getting things done. And so you can call her up at any time. And if you are overwhelmed with lots of things, she'll come and help clean your house. She'll do your laundry. She'll just get those things done without batting an eyelash. And then the fourth person is the late night talker. And I think, particularly when our babies are young, it's good to have somebody that we can just call at any time. And so I always encourage people, to recognize the strengths in their friends. So know who is who, but also know that those people can be professionals as well. So for me, my son's teachers, his nursery school teachers, they were the wise women often for me. Um, so it doesn't just have to be family or friends; it can be professionals. But reaching out and discovering who can be supportive of you and how becomes really important. And I don't know about you, Michael, but I know for me, it can be hard to ask for help. Sometimes I worry about being a burden to other people. But the reality is, I'm not a burden, right? I think all of us at times struggle with asking for help. So, again, if you have four people, if you ask somebody to help you for an hour once a month, and let's face it, we would never bat an eyelash to help a friend for an hour once a month. It doesn't matter how busy we are. But if you have 4 people willing to do that, then you've got help for an hour every week. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I would say, I think we all sometimes don't want to be a burden on somebody else. Each and every
Right.
one of us don't want to do that. But like you said, you hit that one right on the head. The fact is uh, I would, in a heartbeat, help somebody else that needed it. So, and sometimes we have to kind of overcome our own egos and ask.
Yep.
Just ask.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, if you know your friends, then you know what they're good at, because the reality is most of us are not all four, right? And and sometimes we can kind of rely on our mom to fit the role of all four just because they've been in our life,
Right.
right? But if we don't have that mom, right, then we need to spread it out a bit. Now, I'm pretty good at being the emotional listener, obviously. And at this point in my life, I'm also a wise woman in many regards, but I am not a good go getter. You know, I still have laundry in my washing machine from 5 days ago. So, I mean, I'd like to be that, right? But the reality
Absolutely.
is,
Yeah.
I'm just not. That's not what I'm good at. So, and my friends know that.
Well, that's kind of like, yeah, I can relate to that. I could do I can think, I can listen, I can help you do certain things, but I can't clean your house. So I have to put
Right.
somebody.
But I do have some, right. But I do have some friends that, man, that's where their wheelhouse is.
That's what they do. Yeah, my wife's mother
Yeah.
is that way. She could clean a house with white gloves.
Wow.
Specificity. I mean, it was, yeah. That's who I would go to. Is my mother-in-law. Help us understand what happens when a mom or a daughter actually of any type loses their mother. I mean, what kind of a process do they go through? I know we all talk about the 5 stage process, but the 5 stage process isn't always in that order, and it
Right.
isn't always specifically that way. Can we understand a little bit of that?
Sure. Absolutely. And actually, there are 3 things that are particular to moms without a mom. One is, experiencing that grief, right? That longing, that sadness, that sense of missing something that they had expected or wanted to have. And like I said, they don't always recognize that that's what they're experiencing. So, for example, grief doesn't always look like crying, right? And intense sadness. It can also include just lack of energy and that sense of missing something, and also feeling guilty that you aren't enough, right? And so the experience of grief is there. But another thing that moms without a mom go through is difficulty in identity development. So, a big part of how we understand ourselves as moms comes from our own experience being mothered. And so, if you lost your mother early in life, then there's a lot of experiences that you don't have to look back on. Or if you had a problematic history with mom, so it was a mom wasn't able to be the mom that you needed her to be, then that can also create some difficulty with identity. How do I be either like my mom or not like my mom? And so, difficulty with creating a sense of self becomes a little more difficult as a mom when you don't have your mom. And then, like I said earlier, creating a go-to community becomes really important.
I think those are very special points that hopefully you guys that are listening and watching can take note of, because in these type of circumstances, you and I both know that that loss in that void can create a depression that is going to
Mhm.
be reflective upon everybody around us. And if you're a
Yes.
new mother, that can possibly contribute to postpartum. Would you agree with
Yes.
that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it can get in the way of bonding with your baby, and moms can also experience this sense of distraction, right? So longing or memories can take them away from being present with their child. There were times when I would be at the playground and watching my son play, and seeing moms with their mothers, right, and being able to share those neat fun times, that I would just feel sad, and then I would be off in my head thinking about what I didn't have, and I was missing the moment.
Yeah, I
And so that can
understand
be
that.
really hard.
Yeah, I think I'm sure that would take it. It would have to be a quick. You'd have to recognize that. I would think. Take the moment to recognize that, so that you can take a proactive approach to.
Yep.
Any type of as you know, especially depression and anxiety can take a toll on our mental health, and not only does it affect us, it does affect the people around us, and that the first step to helping that and to move forward past that is recognizing it.
Yes.
Take the
Absolutely.
moment to recognize it. Um, I know that you. I'm assuming all of these experiences kind of helped you contribute to why you created this environment for moms,
Hmm.
that they can collectively come on board with support. Um, yeah, again, now worldwide. I know that you've kind of reached out worldwide now, which is like a fantastic thing. Do you think that within that worldwide environment, it creates any cultural differences or any cultural issues that either play a positive impact or a negative impact on that community?
Well, certainly the ways we relate with moms can be different based on culture, but there is still a biological imperative to connect with a mom. And so that's something we can all relate with.
Yeah, I think that's it. And this is related. This little quip right here, real quick. That what you just brought up there reminds me of a clip that I had watched on National Geographic, where I think it was a leopard, had actually killed a baboon, and then when it realized that the baboon was a mother and the mother had a child, the the leopard took the the baby, left the mother there, did not take it as a meal, and took the baby up above with it and protected it until the other, I don't know what you call the rest of the group, the monkeys, the tribe, the family,
Hmm.
came and then walked away so they could go up and get the small child. So that it's even recognized within the animal kingdom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's research done by Harry Harlow with rhesus monkeys, decades ago. Um, Very famous studies where he created with these monkeys fake mothers, right? And so they were raised with wire monkeys that would dispense food, and the monkeys that were raised by um, wire covered in cloth and that were heated did much better than the monkeys that were with the mothers that didn't, even if the monkeys that didn't would give the food and the monkeys with the cloth didn't. So the monkeys always chose the warm, cloth ridden, you know,
Wow,
surrogate. Yeah. And so again, this bonding, this connection, this touch is very primitive.
very primitive. Yeah, that's really very. I'll say it's crazy cool, if I can get
Yeah.
away with that.
Yes, you can. Yes, it
Crazy
is.
cool. Um,
Yes.
what do you when I kind of like to when we have these kind of discussions, I really like to talk about what people who are experiencing those can benefit. What steps can someone take if they recognize, like we just talked about a little bit ago, that they're experiencing some of these issues, these voids, this fact that they're missing someone and or they need to reach out, what would you recommend?
Well, first and foremost, I want your listeners to know that they aren't alone, that what they're experiencing is valid and it's real. And there isn't something wrong with you because you're struggling. And if you are, then I want you to reach out. You know, reach out to friends, reach out to other professionals in your life, um, connect. So I encourage, there's counselors and therapists and psychologists that you can reach out to, and there's also coaches. Coaches are individuals that focus on a specific um, concern or issue, and go ahead and let people know what you're experiencing. Don't suffer in silence. So I am more than happy to hear from your listeners. In fact, anybody that wants to reach out to me, they are welcome to. I am offering a 30-minute free consultation. So I'd be happy to talk about the specific circumstances that you're in and give some real concrete tools um, to move forward.
It's a great opportunity. I think that, and I'll make sure that how to get that free consultation is in the show notes so that those that are in need of it have a direct link to connect with you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
As a father of two daughters, and and a husband to a wonderful wife that has been with me on my journey all of these years, I have to say that yes, I would be happy to make sure that people can connect when they need to reach out. So you think, do you feel that in these particular instances of I won't say mental health challenges, but in a sense it becomes a mental health challenge. Would you agree?
Well, it can. It can. So for some, it can definitely lead into depression or anxiety, or it can be you have recognized, right, and addressed. It doesn't necessarily need to lead to a mental health concern. So you don't need to be depressed or in a terrible place to reach out. In fact, I would encourage, people to reach out really early on so that you can develop the tools to
From
keep
that
that from
perspective,
happening.
is that kind of what's your basis for the community that you've built and that are you are continuing to build? um, your motivation for that, obviously, I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but all of your experiences that you have gone through allowed that created your motivation for creating this community.
Absolutely. So, as you said, I'm a clinical psychologist and I have been for over 22 years. And so I've treated a lot of moms without a mom, just by the sheer nature of who finds me. And I realized more recently, over this past year, that there were so many moms that I wasn't able to connect with because they just weren't able to come into my office. And so I created a coaching program so that I could work with a wider range of individuals and provide assistance to anybody that needed it. And they didn't need to have a psychological disorder in order to see me.
That's a positive thing. And again, I think that a lot people that are in this position, people that are experiencing this, young women, well, I guess any age, that are experiencing this, because I'm sure that even people that are 35, 40, 50 years old, when you lose your mother, it still has a negative impact on
Yes.
your life. It still creates that void no matter what age you are when you lose your
Hmm.
mother. It just sometimes it's more impactful when you're younger because of so many things that we
Absolutely.
just talked about. So from within that regard, I think that a community like this would be a positive approach to communication. And in the first,
Mhm.
I think the first step would be communicating it. Reach out, as we said earlier, and ask.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, how large is the community at the moment? I mean, do you have a large?
Well, right now, I'm working with people individually and helping them set up their community. This fall, I hope to have a um, virtual community up and running, but
Cool.
that's in the works, uh, and it's kind of a process. So um,
Well,
it's
we'll keep up with that, and when you get it up, and when you get it to, as you continue to build, please reach out to me
mhm,
again, and we will have a broader conversation in regard to that community and promoting it for you, because I think it, coming from, again, from a personal perspective as well as a professional perspective, because there were, as a police officer, I, worked in the environment where we went to calls where people were full of anxiety
mhm,
and depression and the postpartum, and they had lost a parent or lost their mother
mhm,
or their father or a child, and it created an environment where the law enforcement had to get involved. So, prior to that taking place, I would happily promote an opportunity for somebody to get involved in a community that can help somebody through
mhm.
what they're going through. That's a very good thing. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so, just kind of to wrap things up, what do you think, if a mother is experiencing some of the symptoms that we just talked about, what do you think her first step should be?
Well, she can connect with me, and I can help walk her through what the next steps are, or she can reach out to her physician, or a counselor that she may know, but definitely reach out. On my website, and I know you'll put those in the show notes. I also have two free guides for moms, one for moms of newborns or infants. And the other one is for moms of all ages if they find themselves getting distracted, like I talked about earlier. So I do have some free resources available to all of your listeners, and I would love if they were take advantage of those.
That'd be great. I forgot to ask you this earlier. If I could touch on this, what
Yes.
is mom guilt?
Mom guilt. Okay. So all moms experience guilt. Guilt is a normal emotion. So every human, not just moms. But guilt is just that. It is an emotion. It is just like happiness, sadness, surprise. Guilt does not equate to right or wrong. So I'm going to say that again, Michael. Experiencing guilt does not mean that you have done something wrong. Guilt is simply a pause button. So all emotion is based on providing us the opportunity to live in community. So different emotions get triggered for different reasons. So anytime that we as humans are doing something that's new or outside of our comfort zone, guilt will get triggered. And it simply gets triggered so that we kind of pause, we look at what we're doing, and make a determination as to whether it is good for us and our community or not. So, as moms, guess what? Most of what we're doing is new. And for those moms who tend to put everybody else's needs in front of their own, if they are starting to set some limits and starting to care for themselves in ways that they may not have previously, then guilt will get triggered because that's new. But the fact that guilt is getting triggered does not mean that you're doing something wrong. So I joke around. I tell people that I call my guilt Gladys. And I bring Gladys with me everywhere, but I no longer let her drive. She has to sit in the back seat. So she doesn't make the decisions, I do. And that's what I encourage,
That's brilliant,
listeners. Yeah.
Gladys.
So you don't have to get rid of your guilt. Guilt is part of being human, but it doesn't decide what you do. You decide what you do.
There you go. I'm gonna have to come up with a name for mine. uh, that
Yeah.
that's brilliant, actually. Yes. Um, Let's talk about how someone can get in touch with you, please, and where we can find you if somebody needs help and wants to reach out.
Well, the easiest place would be on my website, momswithoutamom.com. And that's where you can find the two guides that I mentioned. That's where you can also get your schedule a complimentary call with me. And, we can go from there. It's probably the easiest way to connect.
That'd be fantastic. And I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well so that everybody has an easy way to connect with you. It'll also be on my website, beforeyougo.com. There'll be a link on there as well to make sure that we connect with you. And I'll make sure that the how to get a hold of those guides are put in there so that we have easy
Absolutely.
access to tools.
Yeah. And I'm also on Instagram at Moms Without a Mom. So listeners can follow me as well.
That would be fantastic. Melissa, this is one more thing before you go. So before we go, do you have any words of wisdom you can share with us?
Absolutely. I want all your listeners out there to recognize that they are human and that what they're feeling is valid. And that when you're struggling, be very patient with yourself. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to be exactly where you are. You don't need to be any different.
That's fantastic words of wisdom. Brilliant words of wisdom. Melissa, Dr. Melissa Riley, I appreciate you coming on the show. I thank you for what you contribute to this world and those people that are in it, because who you help affects us all. So thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate you.
It's been my pleasure, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining the conversation with us on this episode. We really appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget to follow us, like us, subscribe. It's all free. If you want to support us so that we can continue to bring you the best of the best, please consider visiting our shop at beforeyougopodcast.shop. That's beforeyougopodcast.shop, one word. We also have a link on our website, beforeyougopodcast.com, where you can directly link to that. You can also consider donating to the tip jar. We would really appreciate it. Don't forget, this Friday is going to start the permanent inclusion of Over the Teacup Fridays, and we will see you this Friday and next Wednesday.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go, a unique conversation about life. If you like our show and want to know more, check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. That's beforeyougopodcast.com. Tell your story, share your expertise, contribute to the blog, and subscribe to the newsletter. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.
And one more thing before you go. Have a nice day, have a nice week, and thanks for listening.
One More Thing Before You Go, a unique conversation about life podcast, is a creation of One More Thing Productions, established 2010, all rights reserved.